But this isn't the only garden at Hampton Court that focuses on the importance of the oak tree. But Tony Smith had 30,000 of them to plant.
I think in all it was about 5 man days to collect the acorns and then another 5 days to sow them all. To be honest, it was a bit of a crazy idea. The message behind the garden is definitely that we have to work with nature. We are part of nature, and I think one of the biggest problems we have is that we see ourselves as separate from nature, and I don't think we can make real progress in really being sustainable and looking after our future until we accept that we're part of nature and not above it or beyond it. And managing forests is part of that. I think sustainable forestry means that the forest is managed in such a way that it's there forever, or as near as forever as you can imagine. So you don't take out more than you put back in. I've been coming to Ashdown Forest for years. It's inspiring. In a woodland like this, there's a great sense of calm. It feels cool and peaceful. You can really lose yourself, and that's really valuable. I think with this garden design, it's taken me back to being considerably younger and messing about in the woods, and that's great. I was camping with my boys underneath an oak tree, and there were acorns falling all around and carpeting the floor, and it just occurred to me that I could grow the oak trees for the garden myself, and it would be a much nicer feel to it than just buying them in commercially. It's a very repetitive business, planting up 30,000 acorns, and then of course you've got losses due to mice, rats, birds, diseases, and actually I won't have 30,000 in the end. I think because our concept behind the garden is sustainable forestry, it's important that we minimise our impact in making the garden, and by not using hard landscaping but using green oak structures from sustainable, well-managed forests, I think we've achieved that. The oak trunk cut into sections across the garden represents the tree that's been felled. It's obviously been felled by man, chainsaw cuts in it, and that represents man using the forest, but at the same time there are 3 cedar trees planted, which represents the replanting of the forest. The garden's composed of shades of green and the coppery coloured new growth of the oak seedlings. Apart from that, it is the purple heather swirl that gives it all a lift and gives it impact. This heather in Ashdown Forest is the same species that we're using in the garden. Purely by coincidence, I had to find a purple heather that would be flowering in midsummer, and the heather specialist I talked to suggested this one, Tetralix Pink Star. This is the natural variety, whereas we're using a selected form with a slightly better colour, but it's a nice coincidence actually that it's the same one that's in my local forest. A really nice aspect of this garden is that the oak seedlings are going to be replanted after the show, and someone told me the other day that apparently oak has a life expectancy of about 900 years, which equates to 300 years growing, 300 years resting and 300 years dying. And that means that these oak trees are going to be around a long time after my show garden's been forgotten.
Well, it's a real shame that Tony couldn't be here today because he's won a fantastic gold medal for this garden, but he's up in Tatton Park building yet another garden, and you'll be able to see that in 2 weeks' time on BBC2. So I'm going to run you through this garden. It's just fantastic. I can see exactly why the judges loved it. At the back, he's got this Norway spruce, which represents the forest beyond on the outside, and then this boundary is protecting the forest, the new forest within, which is made up of all these saplings that he's grown, and it looks absolutely stunning. And then he's also got this log which is chopped into sections and is like a sculptural focal point all the way through. You can't walk on this garden at all, it's just to be admired and understood. But these logs represent man's use of the timber. Now the boundary here are these huge pieces of sawn oak, yet another use of this material, and it's so beautiful you can go up and touch it, but it's a very bold statement, and at certain areas it creates a backdrop. But again, the symbolism here, because these represent huge leaves, almost like sort of solar panels working to photosynthesize the light that hits them. But what I think is really interesting is that just a few years ago, people would have thought this garden was a really wacky, bit offbeat, wouldn't know what to make of it. They're really looking for traditional planting schemes and lots of colour as well. But Tony likes to challenge the perception of what a garden is. He cut his teeth here in the conceptual gardens and got a couple of golds, and now he's translated that thought process to one of the larger gardens here and done fantastically well with it. And Rachel and I, well, we've got our favourites too, but it's what the judges think that really matters.